Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. It's another night episode. Doing quite a few of these this season. It'll probably change. Today we're going to talk about a subject that I've been mentioning quite a bit, that's getting mentioned a lot in the press, it's getting mentioned a lot in television shows and movies, and just friends of mine. Obviously most of them are not engineers, and so they're talking about it, sort of in a fearful way and sort of in a excited way, much less on the excited side. My friends who are really my mentors in coding are posting online in their social media, the lunacy that is going around about where we are with artificial intelligence and where it's going to be and what we're going to be capable of doing, which is my sentiment. But what's strange about artificial intelligence is we have, like religion. When you learn a religion, it's sort of a comforting, it's mostly comforting, right? It's a way to live your life. It's a way to be successful with other people, with your own soul. And then, of course, there are the punishments that go along with religions, which is because they're geared towards making society function and mature and become a society as opposed to law of the jungle. That's what the Ten Commandments do. Like, stop doing this. You can't just kill everybody. Can you imagine the world before they told us not to kill each other? That was a sin of some sort. I don't know if people, 60,000 years ago thought it was terribly horrible. We have cannibals in South America and Africa who believed that eating the people that they killed was not only an honorable thing, but they assumed the spiritual resilience of the people they ate. So I don't know where that is. But AI is growing in a really strange way. It is almost either loathed for its ability to, shadow ban and censor, or it's feared because it is getting into this massive transhumanism arc, which is really strange because, I should say the word transhumanism is strange. I did an episode on a long time ago. It's something that's occurring slowly, and no one's really using the word enough. People need to say the word more because it is what's going on. You need to understand that that's what's going on. Now, the biggest movement on planet Earth for artificial intelligence above ground, is Ray Kurzweil, who is a scientist. He is in charge of his group called the Singularity Project, which is in Mountain View, California, as I understand it, on the Google campus, financed by one of the co-founders of Google. Yes, we know that organization is potentially a fictitious construct created by other individuals and organizations, and you'd probably be right, but that's not really important at this stage in this conversation. But his fantasy has been to digitize his consciousness and live in a computer for the rest of his life. He wants to be immortal. What's interesting about it is that he wants to be the first one to use the technology, I think. And, I was involved with the science fiction script that was stolen and became Transcendent. And both films had the same, because they stole ours, a person was able to accomplish this in the script, and they were the first person to throw themselves into it. And they ended up a really weird, kind of a bad artificial intelligence in the basement. Now, in Transcendence, they switched it such that it was Johnny Depp's character, and he eventually became very wise. In our script, it was the father of the character that was Johnny Depp's character, and it was a daughter. She went off and was very successful in our script. Johnny, the writers who took it, made it both the father and the daughter. It just kept the arc going. Whatever. When you write a film like that and work on a film like that, you are studying the living crap out of what's possible. You have crazy conversations about how to, I was involved in a conversation where the writer, he's fairly technical, but he was like, dude, we need to make like a theory where a hard drive type storage device could be sort of at an atomic quantum level. How would we do that? And I was just, I was using, at the position of, it was electron orbits as a potential method of hiding data. So you do things like this and you research things. Plus, I have my own background, which I've talked about several times with artificial intelligence, which is extremely light, okay? But we have code that's being called AI that's not AI, and then you have code that's AI that's not understood by the public at all. And I think I'm going to be able to describe for you guys sort of the genetic difference between the two, so that when you have a conversation, you can say, well, each one of these disciplines are really powerful in terms of changing the world, but they don't necessarily all qualify as artificial intelligence. Now, what you need to know is that when AI first was, theorized, it was in the 40s, and this gentleman by the name of Turing was a British computer scientist before computers were really well known. He's also a brilliant mathematician. He created what's called the Turing test, which is a test that he barely got to see used. And in his honor, they kept this test, and they still have it to this day, which is you have a wall and a computer, and the other computer's on the other side, and humans on this side talking to the AI, asking it questions, answering questions, and at the end of the test, the humans got to predict whether or not they're talking to a computer or talking to a human on the other side. So the control test is another human on the other side, and the true Turing test, if you can pass, is a program on the other side. Even the first Turing tests, in my opinion, lacked true neural net predictability models and learning, like especially big machine learning algorithms, to conduct this test. Now, in the more recent decades, it has truly been artificial intelligence that's having this conversation with the human. But a lot of folks, and I even use it incorrectly in conversations with people who are other engineers, because it helps them understand generally what the code does. Like, I write code from time to time where, let's say I have a bunch of old data and it needs to get converted to the new data. And it's not ever going to be a clean conversion. I can't just write code to make it all happen. I've got to have a human in between sifting that code from old to new. And so I will write an interface where, as the human cleans up the data, I am memorizing every single thing using code, such that the next time I have to convert that particular chunk of data, everything the human did is automatically done to it, and then it goes to the other side, and so I can batch process data for testing and then eventually release, right? And then you start asking that question, the old question, what is intelligence, right? What makes us real and what makes a computer artificial? Well, we'll postpone the philosophical answer to that, or observations on that, towards the end of the episode. A calculator, for instance, has been taught how to do mathematical equations. So someone could say that that's artificial intelligence. I'm going to say that a calculator is a calculator. It is computing things. It is doing, mathematical functions. It's a little bit different than it starting up the calculator the next day. If the calculator were to go, "Hi, Lisa, are we going to do some more math today? I'm all ready for your sine cosine calculations. I've been thinking about it, and I know how to do them faster." It might see you enter the same kind of data 4 or 5 times and go, "Oh, I understand. That price that you started entering 4 decimal, I know that the cents is 25 cents because out of all the data you've ever entered into me, everything that starts with 4 ends with a decimal value of 0.25. That might be an artificial intelligence calculator that is now learning from everything that you do. But that would just be a small little predictability code, where the code has a little lookup table where it goes, okay, let's keep track of everything. And you have to understand that if the coder who's putting together the calculator like that, if the coder can't conceive of that particular value, meaning, it's a value to you that this job is being made simple for you. It's being simplified for you out of predictability. If they can't conceive of it, then it'll never do it. In a typical normal code sort of scenario. But now if you get to true artificial intelligence, now you start to metabolize as many dimensions of reality as you can possibly give a piece of software. So software could be programmed to learn any aspect of predictability of its use. For instance, I'll give you like a crude example. Maybe you have a computer in your house that's sitting in the front room, and it's for the whole family. And you have one account logged in the whole time. It's just the home account. It's not dad, it's not mom, it's not the kids. But the computer could be taught to say, your job is to try to figure out who's using the computer such that you can start crafting the availability of applications and data and web pages for that particular person. Like, get it ready. If dad's back, he might want to check the sports scores. He might want to do something else, do some accounting. Mom might have her whole thing. Kids will have all their individual personalities. And if a coder's clever, let's put it this way, they could simply study the movement habits of a mouse, the speed at which someone types and the type of keys that they type incorrectly. The 12-year-old son might be typing the letter R wrong constantly. The daughter might do too many spaces or something, just a different behavior mechanism. And once they can kind of figure out, we've probably switched users. I'm seeing this thing move a lot faster. Someone just opened a web browser and went for the sports page at ESPN.com. And they could start feeling who's on the system and change the behavior accordingly. The mouse could be programmed to really give empirical data. A little finger touches the first left, button, and you read the fingerprint, and you know exactly who's on the computer. It has to be up to the engineers to give it its intelligence. Another little qualification in my own brain is if you can expect it to do something, it starts becoming more code-like. If it starts to become more chaotic in behavior like a human being, I didn't know what you were going to say next, otherwise I could have said it right on top of your sentence. Then it starts to having its own personality, its own intelligence. Another factor of life as human beings is the self-preservation of life. Don't kill me. Don't hurt me. So you have to, if you were going to extend that dimension of recognition to a piece of software, well, what is death? What is life? Death might be turning the computer off. Life is turning it on. You start filling up a hard drive, filling up memory, so it's starting to shut down because it can't do anything. That might be a sickness or a death, depending on how the computer is programmed to interpret it. But the huge thing that Kurzweil is trying to do is a mechanical issue. What he started doing before he got into the computer side of things was to study the human mind. Every single biological component of the human brain, the chemical storage and distribution and firing, he's studied that under duress, under happiness, under all the emotional spectrums to figure out how the brain works. Now, probably the misnomer is that you have a lot of bad science when it comes to the brain. A tremendous amount of speculation about how things work. Just think about how many times we've talked about what dreams are. How many times they tell you that you dream in a split second. Every night. You can't possibly dream anything. You can't dream any further than your REM, your random eye movement stage, and everything happens in that little blip of time. I dream all night. I dream all night, all morning. I mean, I can get up, go to the restroom, go back to bed, go right into the same dream. Literally like, wait a minute, guys, something's bothering me. Oh, I gotta pee. Well, be right back. Boom, go to the restroom, come back, jump in bed. Boom, the dream goes on. It's all night long. Well, what am I in REM all night? According to dream specialists, okay, if you don't sink down to that delta and beta phase, really like super deep theta phase, you don't get any really decent sleep. Well, I feel fine in the morning. Sometimes I feel disoriented because the dream is so realistic that I have to literally convince myself, okay, this one's real now. This one's real now, right? One of the age-old issues with artificial intelligence, which they're trying to definitely push through, and this has been something that's been going on for probably 40 years, which is that when you start to look at the anatomy of a human body as it feeds the brain, if you want to mock the brain, you're going to have to duplicate the input systems of a human being. Well, what is that? You've got, sight and sound and touch. Those are three huge things that if Boston Dynamics wanted to put that on a robot. Remember Data? He was captured by the Borg, and he had his emotional circuit disabled. He purposely did that because when he turned it on once, when he had to have an episode where he went and got it, and then he put it in, he turned it on, and he just became so infantile that it was hard for him to manage because his body was probably in its 30s at the time, and he had zero emotional intelligence, and so it was too much, so he turned it off. Then the Borg chick gets a hold of him, turns it back on, sews onto his arm a piece of skin, artificial skin with those hairs. They look really creepy in the episode, right? And she blew on it, and he was like, oh my God, that's amazing. She says, yeah, would you like to have this all over you? Not only have your emotional circuit on, but your whole body's going to feel what a human feels. It was very alluring for him, right? So let's say you could put a camera on a robot, put microphones where there would be ears, and you could definitely create a skin of some sort that would report back that it's being touched. You could even put sensitive skin, touch too hard, touch light, but you'd have to program the parameters of what is hard, what is light. If the fabric was damaged because it was hit so hard, you would have to program the paradigm inside this AI of pain, which means the unit is going to try and reflex away from it, assess the room, find out what's doing it. If the room's on fire, they're going to have to either put the thing out or get the hell out, one of the two. It's a difficult thing just with those three basic senses. Now talk about taste, flavor, right? Your flavor is a mixture between, and smell, right? Your flavor is taste and smell mixed together. Without those two interacting, you don't get a flavor. Interesting, right? Well, they could study the palate of a human, an average human, and say, okay, cheese, when it's tasted this way and it's smelled this way, it tastes this way. It has this flavor, and it's good or bad. What would the programmer do? Would it be like the engineer that made Data from Star Trek? He just gave him his own preferences. So artificial intelligence is much, much bigger than average computational logic gates. We talk about censorship a lot, right? And we know that there are bots out there, little programs that run. And you know what? Almost everything on your computer is a bot other than an application. But even an application, once it's launched, kind of turns into a little instance of a bot. It's sitting there listening to, am I on deck? Am I on deck? Am I on deck? Meaning, is it the most current application? And if it is, it's sensing all the inputs from you and going back and doing something with data and bringing it back and showing you the new screen. You're in a paint application. You're just typing. The letter will show up. It's just a little ecosystem. It's very similar to the human body. A computer is very similar to the human body. The memory is your consciousness. The storage is your long-term memory. The CPU is your brain. And all the input devices are your body parts. Okay. But there was something invented. I don't know exactly what year it was invented. I think by the 70s it was pretty well given its term and being used, which was a neural net. And this theory is it's a tree of little nodes, as they would call them, typically drawn in little circles. And what ends up happening is, based on what this artificial intelligence has been taught to do, those neural nets have a purpose. They try things and they fail, and they're trying to find the successful algorithm for every outcome that they're being tasked to do. That was the most basic model of it. Learning language, for instance. One of the projects I worked on as a kid in high school was to create a database that essentially learned word associations and a predictability model. And so what I did was I programmed this thing that could read anything that you gave it. And at the time, it was much more difficult just to say, here's a book, right? Because we didn't have books on tape, or books on hard drives or whatever at the time. And we didn't have the internet the way we have it today. So today, you could build this AI to say, okay, you're going to study every word used in English literature, whether someone's citing a Greek word or a French word or whatever, you're going to still put it in the database. And you're going to read book after book after book. You're going to read web pages, gazillions of paragraphs of things. And you will develop over time this word association such that, just like Westworld, one word has the predictability of another word, and another word based on an objective of some sort. What are we talking about today? Well, we're going to talk about going to the moon. All right, well, right there, just that moon preference. The computer, if it was educated properly, will look at the word moon and everything it's ever read in the past, especially with going to the moon, and it starts to harvest up into its consciousness. Well, these are the kind of words that are used to have this conversation. And then the AI probably is going to either answer questions for you, which is probably a lot easier, or it's going to query information out of you. It wants to ask you a question. Forming the question after a while becomes fairly simple. What you get back in return, well, it's parsing a sentence. It knows a verb, a noun, an adverb, an adjective, all these things. So it knows what is decorative. It knows what is core to the concept that's being discussed. It knows, if taught properly, okay, that certain words are simply used for emphasis. How hot is it? It's very hot. Oh, well, who is saying that? A human being saying that. Well, okay, so according to a human being, very hot could be, when talking just about the human body, could be 150 degrees plus, 200 degrees Fahrenheit, right? But if you're having a conversation about melting metal or steel to forge something, well, now I could look up a periodic table and look at it and go, well, very hot in a chemical conversation could mean something different. This is what you can program a neural net to understand, but you always have to tell it what to do. None of this stuff initially could help itself. Okay, so fast forward to today. Now what they're doing is kind of clever. They're having artificial intelligence AIs, these ones that have consciousness, sort of. Clean, they can go right through a Turing test in 2 seconds, no problem at all. But now they're seeing how much they can teach themselves by talking to each other. And so they can share information back and forth between two completely different disciplines if they wanted to. Again, it's infinite what could actually take place. They're now having AIs talk to each other to sift out further stuff. Now, what you need to understand is that a lot of what it discovers and a lot of what it concludes in these neural nets is trash. Absolutely useless. And because a human being gets outclassed very quickly with that much data, we don't hold in our consciousness, terabytes and terabytes of data. But these AIs, the big ones that are behind closed doors, are petabytes. I mean, we're talking billions of trillions, right? And so it depends on what it's looking for. Now, one of the more recent changes, I'd say in the last 20 years, easily, is that the coders have figured out how to endow programs with the capability of writing their own code. So when it starts making mistakes, it can start rewriting, and this is sort of what a neural net does anyway, but it can start rewriting its core code, module by module. And so you could take that as far as you could conceive of it. It writes its own module, and that module ends up having a lot of errors. And so it either rewrites it or erases it. Tries to figure out, maybe diagnose what's going wrong with this module. So it can get really messy really quickly. But anytime you've ever seen an artificial intelligence do anything that impresses you, you have to understand that that is a demonstration up to this point in time of a particular outcome that was synthesized by mankind. So if you had an AI like the one in War Games, which I'm sure by the time War Games was made, it was that 82 or 3, somewhere in there, Matthew Broderick, might have been before that, but anyway, that movie was written about a friend of mine, honestly. Yeah, the military had definitely taken computers to that level to run a billion, trillion simulations of some global thermonuclear war and found out that, no one can ever win, ever. They just keep re-scrambling the data, and the Russians did the same thing, I'm certain of it, which is where you get to the point where grown-ups don't have nuclear wars. They don't, which is why we never had one, and probably never will. The only way we're ever going to have a nuclear war is if some rogue agency, or in a 1 billion to 1 chance, one person gains the capability of doing it all by themselves. It's not inconceivable, but they also don't build things without fail-safe systems. And so if some missile launches, there's other redundant systems that can blow that thing out of the sky before it ever goes critical. So you might have a nuclear warhead coming, but if its propulsion system explodes or a Star Wars system zaps it out of the sky, it will never detonate as a nuclear bomb. They have moments when they're armed and moments when they aren't, right? I don't think it'll ever happen, personally. But you have, in the last 2 years, before Stephen W. Hawking died, he came out, I think, on a Monday, and he said, "Oh my gosh, I have been shown artificial intelligence that terrifies me." Never said what it was, right? I mean, that's the thing that's like, really? If I told you I went to the supermarket and I found some produce that looked lethal, I wouldn't just walk out of that grocery store and get my cell phone and start transmitting on social media. "Oh my God, there's a Trader Joe's where I live and they're selling lethal apples." You get rid of the apples right when you see them. You don't leave the place until they're addressed, right? And you don't run your mouth. If you thought you were being followed by men in black that were going to, grab you because you saw these apples, you wouldn't say anything at all if you thought you're going to die. If you had the one transmission to the whole world, maybe you do that, but none of us do, so you keep your mouth shut. So for Hawking to say that, immediately perked my ears because I'm like, bullshit. That's all I could say. Okay, by Thursday or Friday the same week, you have Elon Musk quoting the exact phrase. He was shown artificial intelligence and it terrified him. Okay, dude. And he's doing it in an interview at his SpaceX joint. So he's sitting at a desk, not telling anybody what it is. Well, artificial intelligence being attached to terrifying, you don't need any AI, really. You need that other stuff I'm talking about, the logic gate code stuff that's not necessarily AI. A little bit of learning, but if anything learns and you consider that an artificial intelligence, then by God, like everything, almost every piece of code is artificial intelligence. The second that it finds your preference, right? Now, what I focused on my first episode, which I just want to briefly recap for you guys, is if you want to be afraid, okay, you can be afraid of code all day long. And maybe, there's probably some point in your brain where you should remember what I'm about to say. I just think that we have other forces that keeps this kind of stuff in check. If you thought the leaders of the world were going to somehow build, in some short period of time with no one knowing, millions and millions of robots like the one in Black Mirror, and they were just going to unleash them on the world, some factory that works at night, with robots. There's just no humans present. The whole record of this being done is being hidden. Okay, well, you could go to that total extreme and freak out. They've got these robots. I just watched a special on YouTube about military robots that are declassified. You can go see them. And they're They're still kind of clunky as shit, but they're, they got little tiny ones that can crawl upstairs and stuff. They just look like little ones you'd find on Robot Wars, But as long as you had a robot, okay, driving down a neighborhood street, we have technology probably 25, 30 years ago, above board, off the shelf technology where you could have optics, maybe 2 cameras, 3 cameras, 4 cameras, some 360 setup. You could do it 30 years ago. You just got to have the money to do it. It has thermal cameras that can sense what's alive, what's not alive. And then you can use lasers or sound to figure out how far away an object is. It just basically sends it out, bounces back, and they measure the trip, and that tells them how far away it is. And then based on that, the image size at that distance will tell the computer inside with very little code. That's how big that thing is. That heat signature is a cat. That heat signature is a human. Shoot human, right? You put enough bullets in this thing and some guns. You can put 1, you could put 4, you could put 10. It just depends on how they want to build this thing. And it could just mow down everybody in the neighborhood. Just drive right down the street. You give it a big enough gun, it could go through walls, right? Now, the huge challenge with these robots, which we can only assume that they've solved these issues behind closed doors in the military level, it's the power supply. That's the huge, huge thing. We are told by the patent office all around the world, patent offices around the world, that they will not allow you to register a perpetual motor, any type of power supply that is infinite. They say that's impossible because of all these laws of physics that they wrote down back in Einstein's deceptive days, right? And they'll quote Newton and all that stuff. But I think we know there's some options out there, but I don't know if it's at the level of running a gigantic robot that's got lots of motors and, has to run the CPU. It's got to run so fast that it can take in all this data and make it real time. The faster a processor metabolizes electrons, it's like when you rub your hands together really, really fast and you get friction. Well, the more you put electrons through silicone, it's a friction situation, which is why your computer gets so hot on your lap when you're playing a video game or something, or while the fan goes on if you're processing video. It is cramming electrons through that processor as quickly as possible. So you'd have to cool the system as well. Most of you gamers know that the most efficient way to cool a computer is through a water cooling system. Now, the smaller and smaller they make a chip, the more they can get stuff done with less power, and thus it gets faster and faster with less power. So that's a nice thing. But typically, currently, laptops cost twice as much as desktops, and they're half the speed. I mean, it's just an IQ test. Everybody's failing. But I gotta be mobile. Oh, really? Really? You're gonna go to a coffee shop every single day? Hey, if you're in college, I get it. But if you're an adult, really? But where are some of the areas that we're concerned about artificial intelligence? Well, any of you who saw Minority Report and then followed it afterwards, you realize that they have mastered. Okay, social media is the number one platform for this. They have mastered watching your habits online and then sharing the data and then using big machine algorithms to figure out your profile. What kind of person are you? They look at your credit cards. They look at every single interaction you have with the world as long as you're on the grid. So if you buy things with credit cards, ATM cards, they know exactly what you got, when you got it, and how much you got. And so that assists them in their profiling of who you are. They can look at the GPS coordinates on your phone, figure out where you drive, and establish, oh, he's at this business, she's at this coffee shop, da-da-da-da-da. If you don't leave your house, they'll know that too. Personal phone calls on landlines, they know that too. Everything you do. Because they listen to everything that you say. That's another data set that goes in there that says this person believes in conspiracy theories. This person believes everything that we tell them. This person is this much right-wing. This person's that much left-wing. They know. This person is a vigilante. I mean, they know all this stuff. And so, based on what you think they could do with that information, is how scary that is to you. Now, we all know that the number one goal of any controlling body in the world is control. They want to maintain control, see what they can get away with. Power corrupts absolute. Remember that. And as soon as you gain control, you gain power. And as soon as you gain power, you get to have everything you want, and you can take it from anyone that has it, if that's your goal. Again, it's really, really tough when, let's digress for 1 second on purpose here. There's something about the hubris of man which is very natural. And I think that almost every single one of us suffers from some microscopic level of this, even if you're an extremely good-hearted person. You can take a minister from some church that you couldn't say anything bad about. If a human being experiences massive fortune in their life, even if they've had a hardship and then they got into this beautiful moment in their life, it's hard for them not to wake up in the morning and say, I must be special because special things happen to me. I always have a job, makes a lot of money. Or if I fall down, I can get back up and get rolling again. I've got a beautiful husband, beautiful wife, beautiful kids, beautiful family. I live in a great town. I always drive a fancy car, live in a nice house. I can go anywhere I want, whenever I want, eat whatever food I want. I've got powerful friends, famous friends, whatever you think makes you a success. The more that you gain that, it's hard not to say to yourself, even if you don't admit it to the public, must be something good about me. And that is the linchpin that feeds this narcissism that is the ultimate corruption of power, in my opinion. So the other thing that is the dilemma of man that fuels artificial intelligence divisions around the world is that man can conceive of perfection. He really can. Isn't a number system pretty perfect? It just starts at 0 and goes up to infinity. If you want to count backwards, you can do that too. Into the negatives. You can go into subdivisions, decimal places, right? Ask anyone who owns Bitcoins how much you can split a coin. We can conceive of perfection. We can close our eyes like Aristotle said and see a perfect circle. But then when we open our eyes, grab a pen and try to draw one, we can't do it. Which is why we use computers and machinery to create perfect circles. Anyone who deals with super complex mathematics, they don't want to do long division by themselves. They don't want to do sine, cosine, calculate pi out to 100 decimal places. They don't want to do that. But they want that accuracy and they want that math to be completed, and so they create a machine called a computer/calculator to do that work for them. The reason why I mention these little examples, which I know is kind of insulting to your intelligence, is that man, because of, or by proxy of those thoughts, can conceive of a perfect man, meaning mankind, ladies. And so this whole thing with, androids or replicants or robots or something like that, where we could have a partner in our house to help out with the chores, to help raise the kids, to mow the lawn, whatever you needed to do. It's sort of this fairly immediate goal of mankind to be able to do that. Toyota's been creating those little robots that you can see at Disneyland. Boston Dynamics is creating it all in the name of the military. But robotics is probably one of the biggest industries in the world right now. But it's a multidiscipline thing, isn't it? You have whole teams trying to build the actual physical structure to accomplish a particular goal. So when you want it to be humanoid, you're going to go for a human set of things that other devices can't do. When you want it to be more tank-like, it's going to have tracks on it, and it's going to be more military combat-based, right? We now have... we've had jets now for 35 years that could fly themselves. We just choose to put the human inside because the artificial intelligence wasn't up to snuff, and we didn't have the communications backbone that we have now to talk to that device in a way that someone could pilot it from afar, which is what we have with drones now. Remember, drones have very little AI in them simply because we don't trust them. Now, there probably are some out there that are covert, and it's very difficult for me to talk about what's happened behind closed doors. I don't really have any contacts in that realm whatsoever. So I have people that were in that realm that have been out of that realm for a really long time, and and when you watch how languages mature, because programming languages have to mature to the ability to be able to write code that is able to write itself, to handle neural nets properly. You have to have processors and systems that can actually handle what the task is, and a lot of that's kept covert and it's probably a lot less than what we think now. It used to be that the military, we would always say, is 20 years ahead of the rest. I think that the only way that could be true would be in very specialized areas, like perhaps aircraft, military equipment of certain types. But in terms of a bunch of super fast CPUs, super fast pieces of hardware that we don't have access to, I'm sure those exist, okay? But Intel's not sitting there up in the Bay Area, San Francisco area, San Jose area, not trying to make chips as small as they possibly can. They're literally scientists up there. The second they're able to do it, they'll tell you. It's a big deal. It's like a pharmaceutical company creating a drug that starts to cure cancer, and even if they haven't finished clinical trials, they'll start pumping the PR to say, we're going to have this hopefully, and trust us. But what are the needs of an average man? Because that really gets at the huge thrust of what would you create AI to do? Well, you and I have our list of things. A robot, like I just said, to help her out around the house, the whole George Jetson lifestyle we'd like to live. Blade Runner advanced a different narrative, which was interesting, which is humanoid robots made by the Tyrell Corporation that would go off-world in hostile conditions to be able to do things that were hazardous to humans. Maybe be in a radioactive area, a hot area, or an area just where you could die because something's going to happen. So the robot has been built tougher, smarter, faster, stronger, all that good stuff. So someone in industry might be like, geez, if I could have someone, pick crops or get rid of weeds, then I wouldn't have to use a chemical called Roundup, glyphosate to get rid of all this stuff. And that could be the case. In the movie Runaway with Gene Simmons and Tom Selleck, that's exactly what they had in that movie, was these little robots that would do all your vegetation for you. I prefer that over any poison, wouldn't you? There was a Twilight Zone, I think it was called Sing the Body Electric, and it was about a gentleman who had 3 kids, and the mother had passed away, his wife had passed away, and his mother-in-law, I think it was his mother-in-law or his mother, was just riding his ass about how he worked too much and how he never spent any time with his kids, and the nannies kept quitting for one reason or another. They didn't like the kids or something like that. And so he went down to this local shop and bought an android nanny who was essentially, I think this was even before Mary Poppins came out. Not that the story wasn't much older, but it was a Mary Poppins kind of lady shows up and really engages the kids. But one of the daughters in the story wouldn't accept her, even though she looked perfectly human, until there was a near-death experience, and she eventually apologized, and they lived happily ever after. Then all the kids grow up. The chick finally leaves because they're all in their 20s, and she goes off and helps another family. So that's one of the visions that we have for how complex an artificial intelligence could be. But now imagine that you're just building a nanny with this neural net. Well, all of your objectives from that point forward is to raise children, to really be concerned about the safety of children as it applies to their physical safety, their nutritional safety, their sleep habits, everything, their educational safety, right? Making sure they do their homework and learn things, and just generally do happy, fun things as well. Crafts, arts, go out and play at the playground, whatever. So you could hone that down and really, potentially today, okay, at least have the program fairly intelligent, even though everything else is simulated. What we're concerned about, and this is where the Hawking Musk caution sort of angers me, is one, when they say that kind of stuff and then don't cough up what they saw, it sounds like bullshit, and it sounds like they're literally engaging in fear-mongering to the people. And what's crazy about it is when NASA sells all their fear, doom and gloom, it just came out yesterday, a city killer asteroid came really close to Earth, right? It never happened in our lifetime, right? At least you can say, boy, I better pay my taxes so that NASA can have their $60 million a day so that they can try to knock this stuff out of the sky, even though every time you ask NASA, could you really knock that out of the sky? And they go, hell no. Even if we knew it was coming, what are we going to do? Nuke it? Nothing we can do. We don't have enough time. We never have enough time. Oh, they got a lot of theories about how to land craft on a meteorite of some sort and then start focusing light on it to create a big lens effect, to start burning one side of it, to create like a motor to move it out of the way. Yeah, right. Yeah. A rock the size of New York is going to respond to what level of force in the vacuum of space? None. If anything like that was supposed to happen because God put it there, it's going to happen. And we're just going to have to weather through it, right? But when someone instills fear in you with this unknown, okay, first they're socially being irresponsible not to at least suggest the category that we should be concerned about. But now let's just break it down. They're telling you that they saw something that made them afraid. All right, well, what could that be? Let's just parse that, because I think that's not that hard to discuss. Well, one, it could be some human exterminating robot that's being designed, just like Black Mirror. Everything else in Black Mirror's come true, right? So this little robot looks like a little dog, which is also in the script that was stolen. It has a bunch of stuff in it, right? It has little guns, has little tiny darts that are GPS darts that stick into your flesh. They just blast you, and then these little things stick inside your skin, and it has a GPS coordinate, and you're trying to get them out of your skin, and it's chasing you the whole time. It's got just a little gun barrel, enough bullets in it that it can shoot you. If one of them breaks down because you hit it with the baseball bat or run over it with the semi-truck, well, if there's anything salvageable from that robot in Black Mirror, the little guy, his little friends of the same species would come and pick it apart and then put it together with other parts and rebuild it. So I see distinctly two different categories that threaten mankind. And then there's kind of a fringy third one, which will probably come first, to be honest. The fringy third one is essentially replacing you at your job. Something you're doing can be taught to a computer, and it just learns how to do it. Even accounting, seriously. TurboTax does your taxes for you. Just fill out the interview questions, and boom. Well, as soon as we complete the ecosystem of you put all your financial transactions in your bank, and it knows all the W-2 information, it knows all your 1099 information, any other rewards that you've received from retirement vehicles or whatever investments. Well, it just should be able to tell you at the end of the year, I just took this out of your account. This is how much you paid the government. You don't need an accounting firm anymore. Ever. Theoretically, that's possible, right? So the most nefarious one that is very direct is that sort of doomsday model where some crazy trillionaire in the world, some banker family or something, is going to finance in secret this army of little bots that are going to be released on the world. Maybe they're little flies that go around and just inject everybody with bad stuff. Why they wouldn't just spray it in the air, I don't know. Put it in the water. But and if they want to exterminate the world or put it under lock and key and say, look, you're going to have those cops like the ones in THX 1138 movie, which if you haven't seen is just a bunch of, all the police are robots, all of them. And they're dressed in like California bike cop outfits from the 70s, but their faces are these chrome mannequin faces. They have the white helmet on, just like a bike cop, and they have cattle prods. And as long as you do what you're supposed to, they leave you alone. As long as if you do anything they don't like, they cattle prod you, and it's non-lethal, but it's not fun to live in that world. So either it's going to be it could be, I should say, some extermination event, which again, doing it with robots would be the stupidest way to do it, wouldn't it? It wouldn't be artificial intelligence. If you want to kill the whole planet, I mean, how many ways have we created to do this? Isn't it pretty damn infinite? I mean, poisons and binary weapons where they feed you A and you eat it all day long and it doesn't do anything to you, and they feed you B and you melt. That's been around for, God, I don't even know how many decades. 4, 5, 6 decades at least. They can poison water supplies. They can poison your food. We have chemtrails in the sky, so they could just change the ingredient up there and wipe everybody out. They have cell phone towers everywhere, and 5G is about to be deployed everywhere. They have HARP antennas. So there's a much more economical ways to do this world extermination if that's what they wanted to do. Why have AI do it? So that's why I don't fear the age of the robots, at least in my lifetime. And maybe if I make it to 100, I might see something that freaks me out. I'll let you guys know. The other event would be more subtle and with more intention, which would be to dial that back from some world extermination event to sort of your Chappie sort of robot, your District 9 sort of species of robots which is what the Boston Dynamics looks like it's gearing towards. And, maybe they need 2 more decades to really pull this off. Again, power supplies would have to be utterly revolutionized. As long as there's some nerd on your block that can do an EMP weapon and could hide the fact that they're doing it, then you might be okay. Someone starts walking down the street and you just zap it and it all fries all the mechanics inside. These things are going to be very susceptible to EMP waves probably for a very, very long time, unless there's something they're not telling us about technology. But let's say that we stop fighting wars with human beings. At least the bigger armies aren't using human beings. The bigger armies start using disposable robots. Well, there's an economic problem with that, I guess, in the short term, because the human being, in the eyes of a banker who refers to us as cattle when we go off to war, we're there for the slaughter. We're pennies on the dollar in the average infantry of any division of military anywhere in the world. They consider us to be cheap labor for the war. Now, as soon as you start advancing up to your more your special ops guys, your rangers, your SEALs, your special forces people, etc., then you're dealing with much more expensive assets who have endured, millions of dollars worth of training. I think it was said that the average Navy SEAL, by the time they graduate, the amount of money they think they've spent on that SEAL, because there's so much attrition, right? So 50 guys go in, 3 or 4 make it through the basic first audition into the class. They spent over $7 million per person at that super duper level. So in order to make an infantry out of robots, you got a lot of technical problems to deal with way before this century is over, okay? Which would be, these things would have to cost a couple $1,000 from the beginning, maybe 10 grand, Now, we're probably, I don't know how much they consider an infantry soldier to be worth once they graduate, maybe a couple $100,000 or something with all the training and flying them around and feeding them and all that stuff. I don't know. But think about trying to fight a war in the desert with robots. There's so much going on in the desert. Sand is a horrible surface to fight on. Okay, you're going to fight up in the hills. You're going to fight in a barren desert. You're going to fight in cities. Cities are super duper complex. Human beings, know their neighborhoods pretty well, but you could upload to a computer all of the geometry of a city, all the specifications of a building. They would know every single entrance, exit, and all that kind of stuff. So, it's potential, but we're currently, I think, miles away from that right now. And then again, the artificial intelligence, unlike the nanny who's taking care of your kids, who's programmed for all kid things, the soldier robots would be only programmed for combat. They'd have parameters for what is a kill, what isn't a kill. And what if you said, okay, well, they're probably going to make it such that maybe they find out if a person is armed, and if they're not armed, they leave them alone. So maybe we cut down a lot of collateral damage. And then what if the artificial intelligence is taught to learn who an enemy is? And it assessed the target, said it was non-lethal, and then someone pulled a grenade out of their ass or whatever and threw it, and now all of a sudden, if it was a woman, all the women are now in that particular bot, and if it's distributing the information to all the other robots, well, geez, now all women are targets because one woman decided to attack a robot. Then it goes down to children. If you're a local and you realize that as an adult you're a target, well, we still need to wipe out these robots. We'll get all the kids to put little duct tape bombs, sticky bombs on everything for a little while, and then boom, 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 and then all the robots want to kill kids too. So that little algorithm of saving humanity with robot wars, I don't think it quite pans out. Now, back in the late 90s, someone created an interesting video. It was a mock situation. I mentioned it once or twice. Some of you may have actually seen this. And it was a guy trying to order a pizza. And it was brilliantly done. Someone created a fake piece of software where they were ordering a pizza through their computer software. And they then had the operator on the other side who was filtering the order. And what was happening in this scenario was that their medical records and all of their life's history was being furnished to the pizza place. And they were saying, oh, I see that you're diabetic. Well, then you can't order the Coke. I see that you're really overweight, so you can't order the large pizza. You have this, that, and the other thing, so you can't order these ingredients. And it got down to the point where the person really couldn't order anything because their data was being shared, and it was a massively socialistic future where the software was not doing anything AI. It was just comparing data. It was just saying, I have a database on this person. In order to get this ingredient, you have to have good standings with your health, with society, the country, whatever. You can't be, can't be some rebel rouser. You can't. Otherwise, you lose all your privileges, which is what the social credit system is going to do. It's already doing it. Okay. So now let's jump into the philosophical side of the conversation, because I mentioned this in, I think, one of the episodes that I released during the summertime, but it's very, very relevant at this exact moment in time. And that is this idea that because humans are so flawed, especially when power is introduced, hence control, that it could be probably agreed on in any level of society that we're going to have a messy world for quite some time because of this inability to discipline ourselves. We're unable to control all of our emotions all the time, aren't we? So you will have these theories discussed. They're in lots of science fiction books and movies where humans essentially surrender the overall controlling apparatus of their region, their society, their world to AI computers. And they give it all the parameters of a perfect world. Could even be like Logan's Run. You have an age limit that's enforced. You hit 30 and you must renew, which means die. Well, someone could say, well, that's the only way we're ever going to get a hold of ourselves, is because we're impatient with the human condition developing organically over time. Then this kind of thing should be done. There should be some world computer that distributes money, distributes resources and opportunity, and determines whether or not you can spawn and whether or not you get medical treatment and all this other stuff. Now, what you need to understand is those in control at the time this is created will most likely embed almost a transparent recognition system where they don't even exist. They can go anywhere they want. Nothing will touch them. They always have infinite resources, infinite money, infinite control. It'll be that way. How they handle their siblings, who knows? So you could have someone pitching the Robin Hood theory to you, saying, look, we're going to, steal from the rich, give to the poor, and a computer is going to control everything. It was in the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey with the HAL 9000 that was given ultimate control over the Odyssey that was flying out to Jupiter to see the next iteration of the monolith. It ended up killing one of the members and trying to kill the last guy. But the AI, by the time you see the second movie in 1984, 2010, it was the White House that told HAL what to do, to kill everybody in hibernation and to go after the other two guys. I forgot the reason why that was the case, but that was the case. And a new HAL was actually introduced in 2010, and they had put this red calculator that was, if you type in a certain calculation, it was going to supposedly fry the brain of the computer, which I think ended up failing at some point. If any of you remember the original Alien, they had the computer Mother, and they would go talk to Mother and figure out what they were allowed to do, what they could do. And then they realized one of their bishop, right? I can't remember if that was the first guy's name or not, but one of the guys was an android on the ship. They didn't know. And by the time Aliens came around, the android, it had to admit, that's what he was. Through a little knife test, they figured out he was doing the knife test between the fingers really, really fast. And he even slipped and cut himself, which was interesting. We are now ebbing towards these, what they call hot hotels. Hotels of tomorrow. People are trying to integrate this stuff in their house as much as possible. Every light switch, every power outlet, everything is hooked to some AI, such that when you're on vacation, you can have your house look like everybody's living in there, and you can have appliances turned on, and your coffee's ready in the morning. Black Mirror's touched this with the buds that you put in your head, and it learns who you are, and then you pull it out, and it's trained to take care of you. It's an incredible episode. Transhumanism, what's that all about? Well, transhumanism is, the sales pitch is something like, aren't you tired of being flawed? Aren't you tired of losing your memory, bad eyesight, you can't run like you used to when you were young? Well, we'll just put bionic legs in you and new eyeballs and little sub-processors in your brain, and it will take care of everything. If you can't remember something, well, it'll find out what you were trying to remember, and it'll fetch it for you. The earlier you get this in your body, the better, because then it remembers more. The slow boil started, around certain events where they wanted to chip everybody. That's their ultimate first step, is to put a chip in everyone's body. Now, Europe has done various stints with this, and what everyone finds out is that you get cancer right where the chip is, because any electromagnetic field destroys human tissue faster than the immune system can fix it. You get horrible infections, and you have to get these things removed out of your body. Any experiment that you hear otherwise is usually a lie. The chip didn't do anything, and so it's just this alien thing in your body, or they had it taken out and didn't tell you. But now there's a whole side of AI that will be very interesting to see who has made progress in this particular area, and that is the metaphysical nature of humanity. Now, for those of us that believe we have a soul and that this is a much bigger ecosystem than just being human, there's reincarnation due to an infinite life, it's pure physics. It's not a religious thing. There is a religious element to it, but it's probably not as accurate as the physics version of it, which is to say you can't hide energy in the universe, therefore you reincarnate. I just did an episode about this, I know. But how do you teach an AI to cry, to love, to have loss? Well, for any of you that watched Westworld off HBO, you know that they have shown you a scenario where this happens in a fictional sense. Those hosts had all the emotions that anyone has in life, period. Loops that they went on. All right. Again, What would happen with a first generation robot / AI that's running the robot to create such a thing would be that it would eventually probably reveal its patterns fairly quickly. You would find out what would make your robot cry and what would make your robot happy, because there's certain triggers in the software that would make that happen. Maybe it would take a lot, but there's already little robot dogs and cats and things trying to simulate your friends. They're trying to put a lot of AI into like sex dolls so that people stop procreating, the depopulation algorithm. The danger behind that is the second that, I'll tell you, this is something I think I've mentioned briefly, but I heard it the other day in some fictional thing, and I was so thrilled to have somebody else say it. It just made my day. Let's say you're single and you're lonely. And instead of dealing with that loneliness by going out and meeting another human being and trying to figure out how to do that, which I know, depending on what kind of person you are, can be daunting, but there's always someone out there for you. Don't give up. They will get substitutes for human beings. And this is a much more dangerous algorithm than I think humanity realizes, but those who want us to depopulate love this. Love this. How many single people do you know have an animal? And they're always single. Always. And you go over there and you talk to them about their animal, and there's nothing against animals. Man, I love pets. I'm allergic to most of them, but I love them. Okay? But they end up only being able to talk puppy talk, kitty talk. They don't talk like normal human beings. And so when they get meet normal human beings, a lot of times they seem normal. Sometimes they seem nuts, like the cat ladies. But they start to replace all the human development that they need to really, truly not be alone, not to have their companion die every 8 to 15 years, depending on what kind of animal they own, right? Because they've created a substitute. Well, take that now and anthropomorphize a sex doll. Think about it. Hopefully most people don't have sex with their animal, right? The Bay Area is actually packed with these people. The amount of stories I heard up there about people who married someone, two stories in 12 years of a woman who married a guy. And they're married, okay? One lady had lived with her husband for like a year and a half and came home and find him having sex with his dog, or his dog's having sex with him, and she's like freaking out in the room. This is like, I'm 2 degrees from this person. And she screams and the dude says, "Let him finish." Oh yeah, he's a really well-adjusted human being, isn't he? For whatever reason, he substituted this dog for a human being before he got married, and then couldn't let go of the relationship with his dog. Okay. Yikes. So sex dolls, think about it. You have something that looks like the kind of person you want to be with. And 99.9% of the time it's a guy, because we're programmed to procreate for our entire lifetimes, I swear to God. They own these, these hot rubber dolls, What's always kind of weird about it, too, is that they don't actually, as far as I know, from looking at the photos online, they don't look like normal-sized humans. They look a little smaller, which is sort of a pedo twist to it, right? But, right now, most of them are just rubber dolls. They just sit there and do nothing. But these guys have taken them to dinners with other dudes who have them. They bring their girlfriends. Some of these guys will dress them up and take them into public and stuff. It's like, I'm not trying to slam these people, but we have to redefine what mental health is to look at this and go, oh, that's totally good. That's totally great. Now, is the guy hurting anybody? I guess not, as long as he doesn't take it someplace else, right? If he gets used to little people and he goes off to a playground and goes, oh my God, these move and they're warm, that might be a problem. But now they're trying to, it's going to take a while, but they're trying to stuff a bunch of AI into these things so that they a bunch of them talk to you, I think, right? Well, imagine this thing starts talking to you and you start thinking it's real. There's a Twilight Zone where a guy is given a robot woman because he's on this asteroid. He's been sentenced to life on an asteroid, and he always has to have these 3 dudes bring him his food every once in a while because there's no food on the asteroid. And it's just something that the military does or whatever this group does. And on one of the visits, he says, look, man, it's going to be a little longer between now and the next visit. They're cutting budgets and all this other stuff. So I brought you something special. Don't open it until I leave. The other guys don't know what's in it. Don't say anything. So they get in their rocket ship and they take off. And the guy opens it up and it's this beautiful woman. She's actually a supermodel in real life at the time. And it was brilliantly written. I mean, this is before personal computers are in homes, people, man. This is like 20 years before this ever happens, right? Or at least 15. And this is just before like basic calculating computers, not big computers, right? But she gets out of the box and she's very monotone and barely has any emotions. And the guy, he's really pissed off that this thing is there because he's like, oh, you're mocking me. And, this is what they gave me. This is ridiculous. I don't need this. What I need is a pardon. I need to get off this rock, and he's just freaking out. And he eventually manhandles her and throws her down. Like the first 5 minutes they're together. And she hits the ground and she looks up at him and a tear's coming out of her eyes. And he realizes, oh my God. And I think she said something like, I have feelings too. And as soon as she said that, she became human to him. The artificial intelligence started adapting to him. And she started becoming more woman-like and started figuring out what he wanted in the day. Does he want coffee? Does he, eggs and bacon or whatever? She totally assimilated him. And he immediately apologizes to her and picks her up and takes her inside. Her name was Felicia, I think was her name. And so, time passes, and eventually these dudes come back, and they're running up to his house. They're running, which is different than all their other. They usually hate the guy. They're like, you're here, The captain was always a lot more tolerant, but his other 2 dudes were like, screw you. The guy from Caddyshack was in it, who owns the golf course, about 20 years before he did Caddyshack. But they show up and they're like, you've been given the pardon. Everyone's been given pardons. They, this whole being banished on an asteroid thing is being shut down. We're not coming back, dude. You got to come with us. And we've got so many dudes on the rocket that you're going to have to just bring the bare essentials. And he's like, no problem, man. I'm just going to bring this, and this, and Felicia. And the captain's like, who's Felicia? Oh my God. It's the thing I gave you last time I was here. He's like, dude, we don't have room for her. I'm really, really sorry. And he's like, no. He's like, what are you talking about? And he goes, I have to bring her. She kept me alive, dude. She's like been my everything. She's my rock. And he's like, sorry, man, we can't. And he says, well, you're going to have to throw some shit out, He says, dude, we can't do it. And you got to get going. We got to get out of here. Our window to get out of this place is closing quickly because we're not supposed to be here right now. And so he's like, no, she's real. And he starts running after because he told her to hide at this particular place when they come. And he runs over to her and she's hiding in these rocks. And here comes the other 3 dudes. And he's like, Felicia, talk, tell them, show them that you're real, And she's all frozen, which is part of the writing, suspension of disbelief. And the captain pulls out a gun and shoots her in the face and blows her face off. And she's in some loop saying something. And he looks at the other dude and he goes, see, she is really a robot, man. She's not real. And he wakes up, he disengages, and he's like, oh my God, you're right. I can't believe I just, totally went there. And so they get up and it's over. He's okay. But that gave us an interesting perspective of what will happen to human beings if we start replacing ourselves with human beings, these robot lookalikes, right? Now, technically speaking, probably neither you or me have anything against someone being blessed to have a Felicia in their life or whatever, a Buck Rogers, whatever they want, right? It's their life. They can do what they want. Don't harm anybody, and you're passing the test. But it would be interesting once replicants became, commonplace. Take Blade Runner, for instance, man. Daryl Hannah. My God. I don't know if she's ever been more beautiful in a movie than playing Pris in Blade Runner, right? Even Splash was goofy. As a, meat-eating male, I'll just leave it at that. What I see her in that movie, you fantasize. You fantasize in a split second. She's literally labeled in the movie as a pleasure bot. Your pleasure model. Now Zora, the other woman, she's also absolutely gorgeous, but then she's supposed to be Beauty and the Beast. She'll kill you, and she beats up Deckard's character, so it's easy to kind of peel yourself away from that kind of chick. I know some dudes that want to date women like that. I'd probably go for Pris myself. But now imagine, you're 18 to 22, and you're a male. And these things are cheap, and you get this robot. Now you never have to deal with two things. One, your family genes terminate. Boom, done. Because you're never going to find a woman. Why would you? This woman does everything that you could possibly imagine. Every kinky thing you'd ever want, every little subservient thing that you want. If you want her to stand up to you, you can probably just push a little button and she starts getting ornery with you, right? But two, if you don't deal with conflict with another human being, especially the feminine or male, masculine side, the other side of the equation, well, there's a whole hell of a lot of development that never happens in you. But you still have to go out in the real world and deal with society. And so imagine, like 200 years ago, women in most places in the world, okay, Hawaii is a little bit different, where you had, the patriarch, right? Women were super subservient. They were beat down for thousands of years. You don't say nothing, right? And if certain Sharia law worlds take precedence as they do in Great Britain has communities that have their own Sharia law courts, right? And so women are just nothing in those courts, man. Nothing. And there's all kinds of legal ways you can kill your wife and all kinds of wild stuff. Oof. Right? So you get a robot that's now obeying everything that you want on the opposite sex side. Now your perception of the opposite sex is all screwed up. Maybe your perception of humanity is screwed up. Why are you disagreeing with me? Do what I say. Take a male. They would have one of these robots at home doing everything the guy wants. And I mean physically, mentally, everything, right? He wants for nothing constantly. Okay, you might think, well, great, we'll have a nice, happy male in the world. Then he gets a female boss. And she's busting his balls because maybe he's messing up at work. Maybe he's being sexist because at home he just has to say, I want to do this. And she's already in the position and nude and ready to do it. And the guy gets all screwed up in his head. And now the woman's got to discipline him. But he doesn't know how to take orders from a woman because at home that didn't happen. And that's sort of something we're breaking through right now and trying to get, some of these Neanderthal men, ladies, to treat women normally. I mean, this stuff, it's still, I'll put it this way. I think that it is in a very small percentage of society of men who do this, very small. I don't even want to quote a percentage because I don't know. But the ones that are bad are really bad. And they scar women with their antics, with the things that they expect from women, things they'll do behind closed doors, things they say out of their mouth. It's really bad. And the scenarios I'm talking about are my female friends that tell me that their bosses have done atrocious things in rooms, mention things that are wholly inappropriate, but they're unable to throw down because these men are at the tippy top of these big companies. I mean, like big, giant corporations that have, global presence. And what are you going to do? This guy's got more money than you. He's got more power than you. Oh, he might say he's sorry on Monday if you say something to HR, but he's going to have it out for you from that day on. You'll either be promoted until you're failed, or you'll be transferred, demoted, or something. Something's going to happen to you. You're going to lose that opportunity because you said something about being treated right. It's happening. It is happening, as much as men don't want to admit it. Because, it's easy for me to say I've never been like that to another woman in my life. I mean, I think I was raised completely different. Chivalry was the name of the game when I was being raised, right? But so I might be cavalier about how men don't do that, and then I hear these stories, and it's almost hard to believe some of these stories. That's the other thing you don't want to admit. You're like, no way. And the chick's like, yeah, totally. And then there'll be another woman right next to her going, yeah, that's happened to me too. And you're just like, oh my God, we're still broken. So in closing this thing off, we have a bit of a dilemma. Artificial intelligence is something that governments are programming behind closed doors, military. It's being programmed at every level of law enforcement with the notion of trying to get people to behave better or predict who's going to lose their mind and try to shoot up someplace, right? It's being used to really turn the screws on you with some of the laws that maybe don't have, or maybe they have loopholes or something, and these AIs are trying to figure out where you're taking advantage of things. You know, we have speed limits in the world, don't we? In most countries. And as much as we have them, only a handful of people really sit there, looking at their speedometer the whole time. Young kids do it, but older folks are like, yeah, whatever. And we like that. We like that little bit of flexibility with reality. Business is the deal in pure cash. Well, when it comes time to reporting your income, it's an honor system, right? So what are the other places that are developing AI? Well, you've got universities. A lot of universities, I think a lot of you know this, maybe some of you don't. They're tied into military. That's how they can make a tremendous amount of money with their research. Some universities are just like, they're proverbial technical condoms for military. Everything they do is sold straight to the military. Like I said, I had a friend of mine in the video game business 25 years ago who shared with me that, he developed a bacteria-eating virus. And it was an extra credit question on his PhD test, and he was able to take it home, and he created this whole thing, how to synthesize it, how to make it. And this was in the earlier 90s this is when he actually did it, was in the earlier 90s. And he said that his professor came to him from the college and said, do you mind if I sell this answer to the military? They're willing to build a new wing on the side of the college. And he said, sure. And then within 2 years, someone in Canada died of this exact thing. And now it's all over the press, right? All these people dying of these bacterial skin-eating viruses and stuff. People go in the water and get it, or they get it someplace. No one knows where they actually get it. He was very fearful that someone just took it across the border and tested it. So that can be a little freaky, right? Artificial intelligence can also be something a nerd does in his basement. It's possible. And you have to understand with technology and all skills in life, you know this for a fact. You have one, at least one in your life. You do. Where there's something that you learned how to do at some probably earlier stage in your life, but it doesn't always have to be. And for whatever reason, it was super easy for you. And it's hard for everybody else. I was really good in geometry and trigonometry. All my friends were either passing with A grades or failing with F pluses. It was either their brain thought that way or didn't think that way. Some people are really good at calculus, other arts, but some people can play the piano, some people can play sports, and some people can program. And inside programming, there's all kinds of different programming categories, right? So you have like your most novice coder in the world is your web coder. Your next level up may be like a mobile coder or an application programmer. Your next level up would be your video game programmer. Next level up from that would be your artificial intelligence programmer. Now, I guess the video game business is a nice, just to throw that in there at the last second here, it's a nice place to distinguish between true AI and just really smart systematic algorithms. Okay, there's one could say they're both the same thing, but I don't think it is. For instance, first-person shooters for a long time had to be network video games where you had to play another human being because they didn't have the artificial intelligence, quote unquote, as advanced as it needed to be to build an opponent that was artificial that would come and get you. And then as we got better and better at that, boy, that AI started getting insane. But it's not really learning anything. That's the thing. It simply looks at where you are in the map and comes after you. That's it. That's not what I would call artificial intelligence. The robot driving down your street is not necessarily AI, in my opinion. Felicia, the robot, now that's AI. That's someone learning all kinds of metaphysical reactions to emotions, be able to cry, able to laugh. Knowing when a joke is funny would be the most incredible AI in the world. They said that it came out recently that they had an AI write a screenplay. I would love to read that. It would be probably some pretty dry shit. Or the programmers of the AI simply filled it with a catalog of all jokes and all gags and all methodologies to make suspense happen. And all the algorithm is doing is just stitching something together that's mildly believable, where locations are managed and characters are managed, and there's an protagonist, antagonist going after each other. Okay. Is that really AI? I mean, is a computer able to go, I'm going to think of a new futuristic movie where, a cop comes from the future, goes to the past, and tries to kill Sarah Connors? Now, that would be true AI if it's not biting it off of another script that's been fed to it. If an AI could write a piece of poetry that really touched the soul, where you didn't see other people's poetry lifted and just simply rephrased, it's truly original work, that would be AI. So what I'm trying to do with this episode is to focus you on areas, one, to establish the distinction between the two. Both can be very formidable, right? Algorithms can be just as deadly as true artificial intelligence that can learn. You're probably more threatened, technically speaking, by an algorithm that can't learn than an algorithm that could learn, right? So you could, all these sci-fi movies where they take robots or sort of HAL 9000 sort of things. HAL never had a body. He just had an eyeball, right? He had all the eyeballs in the whole place. But if let's say a robot wanted to hurt you, and then you could have a conversation with it and say, well, I don't think you want to hurt me. Well, why wouldn't I want to hurt you? And then you could have the conversation and teach it the value of life beyond its own personal boot up definition. That would be an AI. But if the goddamn thing is just a robot with an algorithm to kill, there's no conversation. There's no learning. It is there. You are human. You are to die. There's no input for any other eventuality. That's more dangerous than artificial intelligence. That already exists, and that's existed for a really long time, and we're all still alive. The social ramifications of replacing human beings with artificial ones, oof. I think the nanny to help raise your kids, if we could ever build a machine that we would trust in such a way, maybe. I wouldn't start with kids, right? Why don't you put one in my house to help me clean up and do my laundry? Then we'll move on to other avenues, right? What I don't want to see personally is a misunderstanding of the technology that leads to hysteria that we can't manage. I don't know if it can be done in this particular category because of the infinite combinations that can be created behind our back. And it's almost as if society has to remain vigilant about where this technology is being taken and to what extent and what problems we're trying to solve with it. But what's funny about it is, or interesting, I should say, is that we are not having a global conversation at all about this, and partially it's because of the misunderstanding of what it is. And where would you go? Where would you go to have a real dialogue? I mean, isn't this kind of interesting about the world right now? We have this internet. It's, being used 90% by the deep state to control our thinking, 10% to pass around the truth. But even the truth is hard to discern today because they've realized they can infect those arteries with disinformation. And so, geez, what do you know? It's true or false, right? We, as far as I know, besides think tanks, which usually have a very a strict definition of what you're going there for, because a think tank usually meets on a particular day of the week. A lot of times it meets on weekends because everyone's off on the weekend. Some of them have to charge you money because they have to pay for the lights and the venue that you're going to. But you're there to usually make money because you're spending money to be there. And so you're really dealing usually with business objectives. Now, once you deal with government departments, that's where you start getting into a group that does analysis on things. What if we had a terrorist attack? What if a nuclear bomb happened? What if we have a massive earthquake, 2 massive earthquakes? What if a meteorite lands in Colorado? What if Yellowstone explodes? All these different things. What if aliens landed on Earth? All these different scenarios. That's where your government spends money, lots of money, and thinks about these things. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but shouldn't we as the citizens, the 99% of the rest of the world, be having some sort of intelligent dialogue about this stuff? Part of it's why I create all these weird esoteric episodes, so that maybe my little drop in the bucket or my drop in the ocean can influence something to have a conversation. Again, it's not important that I'm right or wrong about anything I've ever talked about on any of the episodes. What's most important is you think, that I bring up subjects that makes you either disagree or agree, because you're either affirming your own beliefs that are contrary to my own, or maybe you've never thought about it before and it introduces itself as, oh my gosh, yeah, I probably should put some cellular power into this thought, into this eventuality for mankind. So I'll tell you this at the end of this thing. If anyone else comes back out to the press and says, I've seen something that terrifies me about the world of AI, blah, 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 if the next thing out of their mouth isn't what they saw, be suspicious of that person and be disappointed in that person, because they're not telling you what's going on. It would be tantamount to someone saying, we finally talked to aliens. They came down in Area 51, had a conversation with us, and it was terrifying. It's like, okay, well, if you're going to make me terrified to go to sleep now and, worry about an alien invasion, will you at least owe it to me either to do one of two things? Keep it to yourself because it's something we can't control, or we learn how to duck and cover from aliens or something, right? We're here to preserve mankind. That's what we are. If we do anything to undermine mankind, if you buy into this hate humanity thing, which is a big theme going on, it's been going on forever, then I don't know what your position in the world, or your value to the world is, if you're sort of subliminally a psychopath that wants to get rid of the world. They want to watch the world burn, as we talk about in many episodes. I hope that person, I won't accuse anybody watching the show, I hope that person can find a way to recalculate their perception of the world. Yeah, there's a lot of people that are different than every single one of us, and it frustrates us that they're in a stage in their life right now where it seems like they're completely delusional. We've been through phases like this in the past. Segregation or desegregation in the 60s, where blacks weren't allowed to go to schools with whites, and we had separate fountains and separate bathrooms and all this other stuff. That was an atrocious era of America. And we grew out of it. Thank God. Now, we still have people that believe that should be the way it is. Sure. But they're very isolated. They're very teeny tiny in number, and they're not getting their way. That's the nice thing, right? And so when we contemplate replacing, human functionality with artificial functionality, just remember, just like your brain, when you take a drug all the time that supplies, let's say, dopamine to your body, or testosterone, or some other thing that you're taking, your body stops manufacturing it because your body says, I don't need to. Your body only makes what it needs to. It feels the deprivation in your body and goes, make this because we're going to die if we don't make it. But if you habitually take a drug, then your body can lose all functionality to ever turn it back on. That's why certain eating habits are really bad for you. When you stop eating what you're made out of, your body stops trying to find it from food supplies, and it finds it by eating you alive. right? Your skin gets really thin and you get sick and you croak 20, 30, 40 years before you're supposed to. To each their own, for sure. But I think artificial intelligence is aimed at the world as a whole, not just an individual. And so it's something that we have to kind of keep our eyes open on. If any of you follow this particular division of science, this is something that turns you on and you actively seek out arteries. And if you've ever found any really good arteries that update on a daily basis, please share them down below for me personally, because I'd like to find some decent arteries, because I don't know of any really good, sort of internet junctions where this stuff is barfed out on a daily basis. And I can't say that I've done a tremendous amount of research trying to find that sort of thing, but I would like to get it from a person who really has this as a pet project of their own, because I think you will have already done the sifting for me, so that'd be cool. I'm going to guess that almost no one will ever post that, because I don't think anyone ever follows it. But if you do, please share it down below. I hope you feel me. And on the subject of sharing, if you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. We have currently, as of this recording, 2 feeds for video, which is YouTube and BitChute. BitChute has been really great. It's a little ornery to upload videos, but I thank the Lord that they exist. Let's put it that way. As far as audio, you can have it on your Mac or your Android device, iPhone, Android, whatever you want. Links are all on the website. There's 2 social media outlets, Twitter, which I just post, the videos when they show up. I don't like Twitter at all. I don't mess around with it at all. And then the locked Facebook group. So it's a private place. It's locked. And so we have just a great group of folks. It's a good place to just have a laugh. I mean, what's great, I could just tell you personally, I go up there to have my day uplifted, and just by everybody, all their comments and kind of some of the chaotic responses or posts that people have. It's great. So thanks to both Kaz and Dave for moderating that with me. I really appreciate that. With funding this show, there's definitely 2 places to donate. There's a PayPal account, which no one's ever used, and there's the Patreon, which a lot of social media outlets do. For those of you concerned about anyone generating revenue off something like this and still being not a shill and all that conversation, I put ads on some of the videos. I put banner ads on everything, but some of the videos where I think all of the diehards have already seen it, I turn on a pre-roll ad that you can skip. The reason for all this fundraising, again, the most I've ever made in a month was, I think, $160. That's when Patreon was really high and my view count was really, really high. So knock yourself out. I mean, I'm not making a ton of cash off this. Each stick is about $10, so think about that. But the real goal would be to obviously supplement my income to a point where I could do this at a much higher level of quality and potentially hire other people to help put together the show and produce episodes for me, such that I have more data than I would ever find by myself. But I would love to get out of the editing process, which is a super time consumer. If I'm ever taking time to put episodes out, usually I've got 5 or 6 in the queue. Like right now, I have about 8 in the queue that none of them are released yet. And I'm going to have to go through and pound through all these episodes. I've done 3 episodes I've thrown away. Just this season before it's launched. Like, this is season 5 right now, but I haven't even launched season 5 as a result of, as at the point I'm working on the intro right now. So the reason why episodes get thrown away is because they suck. And why do they suck? Because I don't have enough time to really research things properly. And when I watch it back or listen to it or think about it, I'm like, that was trash. So that's the reason for funding this thing and getting it to blow up. It probably never will. It's super duper shadow banned, so whatever, right? And as I always say, there's a remastered season 1, which I'll probably stop saying about halfway through season 5. If you see anything on this channel in season 1, that's the original version of the show. Sometimes they play, sometimes they don't, because they have music in them that's copyrighted. I took all that out for the new season 1, rebalanced all the audio, took out a bunch of pauses. Again, some episodes are 5 minutes shorter because of all the stuff that's been taken out. None of the words, but just pauses and stuff. So anyway, until the next episode, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.